Our next guest is from Brisbane in Queensland, in Australia's north. His name is John Wilson. He's the national spokesperson, or should we say the president of the Australian Freedom Union. John, welcome.
Good morning, Simeon. Good morning, Simeon, and Happy New Year, comrade.
Thank you. Happy New Year to you also. It's our first broadcast in 2025, the 10th of January today. It's going to be a big year, isn't it, John? Very big year, politically, internationally, and also politically, locally. Now, I have been asked to sort of stay out of local politics if possible, and we can get into that with you on this show. But it doesn't mean everybody else has to stay out of local politics. The only reason I would be staying out of local politics is that there is some suggestion there may be a prisoner exchange, some type of an exchange. You've heard about this story in Russia, in the Kursk region, of this captured Australian.
Yep, I've been following it, Simeon.
What do you make of it, John?
Oh, I think there's plenty of legs to this, mate. Look, Simeon, as the former president of Trades Hall Council in Canberra for 3 years, I'm very, very intimate knowledge. I have lots of intimate knowledge with the Canberra diplomatic circle. I spent a lot of time in my former life liaising, talking. A lot of work goes into the diplomatic corps. And so, foreign prisoners and that has been an issue that the Australian trade union movement. I mean, we worked for several years when the former president of South Africa, Nelson Mandela, was in jail. I mean, we worked for several years putting pressure on the South African embassy in Canberra to have him released. So I've got a lot of experience, a lot of background, a lot of blooding in this sort of this sort of set of circumstances. Now, there has been this Melbourne man captured. He's a mercenary. He's probably committed war crimes, etc. And he's in a lot of trouble. His life is on the line. The Russians probably have every right to really throw him in a gulag for the rest of his days, if not execute this guy. And I think...
John, I like your spirit, your tenacity, but we've got an international audience now. We've got people watching from all over the world, and thousands are tuning in to all our platforms. Please continue. But before you continue, just for those watching, wondering, what are we talking about? Let's just play this clip. This is a compilation of what the Australian media has been saying in the last few days about this case of Oscar Jenkins, an Australian man. Some people call him a mercenary. Some people call him a teacher. Some people call him a biology teacher. Let's just see what the Australian media is saying, and we'll continue after this.
Almost immediately,
let's go, boys, we're good.
A cohort of Australian volunteers
get down,
has been at the front line of Ukraine's defence.
Non-stop!
Several have been killed.
What do you think was going to happen?
But for the first time during this conflict, the government's now scrambling to secure the release of a prisoner of war.
It is a dangerous thing to do, to enter into a war zone in a time of conflict.
With respect, we'll like appropriate representations, and we always look after Australians.
Lying son of a bitch.
The Aussie volunteer on the Ukraine front line.
Let's go!
Who stepped on a landmine.
The Australian volunteer on the front line. The step on a motherfucking landmine. He thought he could get paid for shooting at the Russians. But instead he lost his hand and foot's ability to function.
The reaction online after the 7 News story was savage. Deal with it yourself, mate. Leave him there. Deserves everything he gets. Knew what he was getting into. Now cries to come home.
Did that go the way you thought it was going to go? Nope.
For now, the focus is working out exactly where Oscar Jenkins is being held. His condition also isn't known.
Australia has little leverage with the Kremlin. Australian authorities too do not know the current location or condition of Oscar Jenkins. There has been, of course, calls from an Australian-Russian man being held up in the Russian consulate in Sydney. He goes by the online moniker of Aussie Cossack, Simon Boyakov, but he is asking for a prisoner transfer to involve himself and Oscar Jenkins. Russian Ambassador Alexei Pavlovsky saying very little yesterday about this very sensitive case.
Steve Richter says, will Aussie Cossack be freed in a prisoner exchange deal between Russia and Australia? Crikey, Steve, I thought I was the only one that was thinking along those lines. As soon as I saw a video of an Australian mercenary who says he's a biology teacher fighting as a mercenary in Zelensky's army, I mean, I knew wages for biology teachers in Australia were not likely to be great, but to risk your life on the Eastern Front for Zelensky, for money, doesn't seem like a very wise career choice that a man of that education would make. But anyway, I've seen the interview. He's Australian. He's a prisoner of the Russians. The Aussie Cossack is a prisoner of the Australians. I'm not Henry Kissinger, but even I could broker that prisoner exchange. Go ahead and do it.
It's his fault. He got himself into trouble.
How could he be brought home? What are the avenues available to the government here?
Look, at the moment they're quite limited, and I think we really need to be cautious about thinking about the ways in which Mr. Jenkins could be brought home. Of course, that Russia adhered to international humanitarian law, and in particular that Mr. Jenkins is recognised as a prisoner of war. And so that's really the issue I think that Australia will really be concerned about, and that is the characterisation of Mr. Jenkins as a prisoner of war, for which he would gain certain entitlements and privileges under the Geneva Conventions, or whether Russia would seek to label Mr. Jenkins as a mercenary, which could have much more disastrous consequences for his future.
If confirmed, Melbourne man Oscar Jenkins would be the first Australian prisoner of war in this conflict. The former biology teacher is believed to have been captured in Kramatorsk in the Donbass region, some 700 kilometres from Kiev.
Our immediate priority is understanding where Mr. Jenkins is and confirming his well-being. The Australian government is making representations to the Russian government. We urge the Russian government to fully adhere to its obligations under international humanitarian law, including with respect to prisoners of war.
The Russian activist who spent 2 years locked in asylum was going global with his plan for a prisoner swap with Jenkins.
Keep him alive, don't kill him, don't torture him. He's an Australian, he did the wrong thing, he's a mercenary, but we need him.
His lawyer telling 7 News they've already written to Foreign Affairs.
At this stage, I don't see any impediment. It's a political issue rather than a strictly legal one.
Even the federal opposition supports it.
What is likely to happen to Oscar Jenkins now?
Look, the Russians make a habit of prosecuting legionnaires who they capture as criminals, as mercenaries, which of course is illegal because these guys are military, are members of the Ukrainian military, essentially, and are therefore entitled to prisoner of war protection. So that's the threat, but they've also managed to do prisoner swaps on a number of occasions, including swapping the captured Western legionnaires for Russian prisoners. So really, there's a chance either way. I understand a member of the Duma, the Russian parliament, posted something on Telegram saying that they're considering a prisoner exchange. So there's some moving pieces there still happening.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the compilation of what's been happening in the Australian media. John, very active, aren't they, in the media? Flurry of news reports on that. What do you think?
Oh, that was a great expose, Simeon, a great expose. Look, it's so apparent we have two-tier policing here in Australia, and you've been caught in that. They've set you up on bogus police charges. They want to prosecute you for no reason whatsoever. You're an innocent man. You've got every right to obtain your freedom, and the Freedom Union of Australia, which you are a member, is here to support in any way we can. Full stop.
Well, thank you. Well, I'm very fortunate because I've got this document. This is a Russian passport. Now,
Yes.
this Russian passport entitles me to the protection of the Russian government, and the Russian government, throughout the ages, throughout history. I mean, Russia is a very established and old country, and there's a saying in Russia: we don't give up our own. So I'm in the Russian consulate. The Russians have said, "Yep, we've given him a citizenship. He's got a passport." And it's been now 2 years and 1 month. All of a sudden, we have this gentleman, Oscar Jenkins, captured. And I apologize, I incorrectly reported that he was captured in Kursk. He was actually captured in Kramatorsk, which is not too far. That's in the Donetsk People's Republic. But seriously, what was he doing there? Now, there are some people advising me, saying I should not be saying anything on this topic because there is serious interest. There is a political appetite for this. You see, if there was an exchange deal, Oscar Jenkins would be saved. He'd be brought home. I personally think Oscar Jenkins is just someone who's mentally ill. He's not really a professional soldier.
No.
It is worrying that he is a biology teacher. That is worrying. I'll tell you why it's worrying. What they're saying in some circles in Russia at the moment is if there is any chance that Oscar Jenkins was involved in the bio labs, the bioweapons laboratories, in any type of involvement as a professional in the field of biology, well, then he's got very big problems. The Russians
He's got war crimes. Yep, he's got war crimes on his hands.
Yeah, and that of course increases his value, his worth in terms of a trade, because the Russians would not want to give him away for nothing or for free.
No.
So if he's a biology teacher, if he was involved in something to do with biology, we know there are bioweapons factories and laboratories, and that's part of the reason why Russia started the special operation to neutralize the bioweapons labs where they were conducting these experiments with plasma cells. And we know that even the Doherty Institute in Melbourne, in Australia, was actually caught red-handed, weren't they, John? Importing plasma cells from Ukraine.
Yep.
And the question is, why Ukraine? Is because there's no rules there. Everything's for sale: organs, children, men, women, hearts, livers, kidneys, eyes, blood samples, plasmas. Life has no value, unfortunately, under the corrupt Zelensky regime. And before the war, so 2014, when it all started, there was about 52 million Ukrainians.
Yep.
Now, you're lucky if you've got 15 to 20 million left. Not because they've all been killed, of course. About 8 million left to Russia. Another maybe 6 to 7, 8 million were actually living in the territories which Russia has now liberated. Then 5, 6, 7 million have left to the West. And everyone's leaving, everyone's hiding because people are being forcibly mobilized and are being arrested and thrown into the front lines to die. It's very sad. Look, I really do, honestly. People think I'm an enemy of Ukraine or Russians are enemies of Ukraine. We are not. We are so upset that the West has captured Ukraine and is using Ukraine as a battering ram against Russia and has brainwashed a whole generation of Ukrainians. Brainwashed them. Basically turned them into Nazis, unfortunately. It's really sad. Really
Look,
sad.
Simeon, this is the last throw of the dice, mate, of these central bankers, these Khazarians, and all of these other warmongering bloody Third Reichers out there. This is their dying wish to commence and to drag us all into a third world war. Now, President Putin and President Trump aren't going to allow that to occur. And we need these two men. These two men are not war hawks. Both these two men have done everything they can to secure peace in the Middle East and in Palestine and elsewhere. Okay, we need these two men to sort this out. The President Putin and the Russian people have my full support in this war in Ukraine. Full support. What is happening in Ukraine with the Ukrainian people, mate, is heartbreaking. Heartbreaking. Zelensky and all of this NATO push to drag the world into a third world war is failing. It's failing. And we are seeing the results of this, Simeon. I mean, God bless President Putin and God bless President Trump. We need these two men to clean this bloody war up and to shut it all down and to shut NATO down as well.
Well, let's talk about what might happen. And tonight's show, of course, or this morning's show in Australia, is dedicated to will Putin and Trump stop NATO? Imagine a world without NATO. What is NATO? The North Atlantic Terrorist Organization, or Treaty Organization, as it's officially called. But it was formed after World War II. And by the way, top German Nazis, through Operation Paperclip, were involved in the leadership of NATO. And it was formed as a way to challenge the Soviet Union. Now, the Soviet Union dissolved in 1991. So, to be fair, NATO should have dissolved in 1991. But instead of dissolving, as Paul says, NATO are the thugs of Europe, NATO started encroaching and recruiting former Soviet countries, former Soviet allies, former Soviet satellite nations into NATO. Now, President Putin once said, why doesn't Russia join NATO? Because if Russia joined NATO, what's the point of NATO? And NATO is essentially, it's a business model. It's a way of, if you look at the schoolyard bully who walks around at lunchtime and takes $2 or $3 off each kid and says, you got to give me your money, a portion of your lunch money, and I'll protect you. No one will bash you up. And that's what NATO does. That's what NATO is there for every single country to pay 3 or 4 or 5% of its GDP, and they're pushing. They want more and more money. You've got some countries who are paying more, some paying less, but essentially all that NATO money has been collected from the NATO countries and then fed back into the United States and the British and the German military-industrial complex to buy weapons. And that's why the Ukrainian conflict was a perfect business opportunity for NATO. When NATO was literally openly saying to countries like Greece, give Zelensky all of your old gear, all of your MiGs, all of your anti-aircraft systems, all of your old tanks, everything you've got, we'll replace it with new NATO gear. And that's why it's a real tragedy that the Soviet Union, in its glory days, was supplying countries like Greece, like Romania, like Yugoslavia, Poland, especially Poland, East Germany, supplying them basically for free, giving them good weapons, missiles, tanks, artillery. And this is the Soviet Union doing this out of the goodness of its own heart. And then fast forward to 2022, and all of these countries, Poland particularly, Greece, others, Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, Romania, handing over all these weapons to be used to kill Russians. It's a disaster, right? It's a complete geopolitical nightmare that in the days of the Premier Andropov, Brezhnev, all the Soviet leaders stockpiling weapons, handing them out, building bases everywhere, and now all these weapons are being given to attack Russia. And of course, the Soviet people had to stand in line for consumer goods, for washing machines, for televisions, for cars, for years, right?
Yes.
And why? Because the country was busy arming everybody else and helping everybody else, helping countries in Africa, helping Angola, helping Egypt, helping Syria, helping South American countries, helping North Korea, helping China. How much did the Soviet Union do for China? And this is one thing which I often have found myself saying lately. Why doesn't China help Russia more? Are they really that afraid of the United States? And are they really putting business and trade and commerce first? I mean, if China wanted to, China could supply 100,000 drones a week to Russia. Rather than Russia sending hundreds of thousands of men, this is very, very precious DNA. The Russian DNA pool is not large because for the last 150 years, the Russians have been fighting all the time, being invaded and fighting and winning, by the way. And when they're not fighting Germans, they're fighting each other, such as the Russian Revolution, the Civil War, and then everything else. So there's not that many Russians left. And Russia should have a population of 500 to 600 million right now. Unfortunately, it doesn't. But where is China in all of this? China, from one side, says it's a great ally of Russia. It's clearly helping Russia, buying Russian oil, gas, and resources. But with China's manufacturing potential, with their tens of thousands of factories, they could switch to producing for Russia. And day and night on the Trans-Siberian Railway, going from China all the way through Russia, they could be shipping in drones. The future is drones, hands down, right, John? Everyone can see that.
Yep.
and China has the manufacturing capacity to do so. It's just one thing which I'm looking at China thinking, what are you waiting for? You're waiting for Russia to bleed out, right?
Look,
we'll keep fighting, we'll keep dying, we'll keep winning. But for goodness sake, I mean, when once Russia wins, Russia can sit down at the table at the victory banquet and have a look around and say, we did it all on our own, right?
Yeah.
Who helped us? Right?
Yep.
John, honestly, you and many others in the Western.
There's several big moving pieces in China. You've got the PLA, right, the People's Liberation Army, and they generally operate on the graft and corruption of the Communist Party. So you've got the PLA, the army, the military. Then you've got the lifelong president, which is President Xi, and then you have the Communist Party, right, or the Communist, which is the People's Communist Party of China, right? And then in the background, you have the ancient secret societies, the White Dragon or Silver Dragon and other secret societies in China. Now, they are the moving pieces in China. Now, the Communist Party of China are the central bankers. They've been there for over 100 years in China, and they've been organising all of the Chairman Mao, all the mass unrest, all the massacres have all come from them, right? They have seeded their infection, the central bank infection in China, well over 100 years ago, the Rothschilds, okay? Now, China in itself is going through its own war, internal, its own transformation, and they are not going to remain a communist country forever. It's not. They are going to grow out of this. You watch. I don't know why they're not assisting Russia. I say that President Putin needs all the help he can get, but I say President Trump's got to give it to him. President Trump has to help President Putin defeat this Nazi onslaught that's happening in Ukraine and put that to bed and get that war sorted out, right? They're two men apiece. I'm convinced of that. They're very smart, very capable, and the world needs these two men to work together. Now, sooner or later, I'm hoping President Xi comes on board, President Modi from India, and also, the Emperor of Japan, the royal family of Japan, and elsewhere. The world needs peace, But if we're not going to vote our way out of this, Simeon, I mean, the whole political structure around the world is compromised, mate. I don't care whether it's Canada. You're not going to look at Justin Trudeau. You're not going to vote your way out of that mess here in Australia.
Trudeau's gone. Something to celebrate. Good news to our Canadian viewers. Congratulations.
Yeah. Look. Now, look. We need the laws to be applied here, Simeon. We're in a mass cover-up at the moment. All of these regimes all around Australia and all around the world and here in Australia have committed horrible crimes against their populations. We need the laws to be enforced. That's what we need. We need arrest warrants to be executed. I mean, we have Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel with an arrest warrant out on him. He needs to be arrested, charged, go to court, found guilty, and then hung. That's what we need to see around the world right now, right? Now, the Freedom Union, I mean, you right now, Simeon, you are only protected because you're protected by international law, okay? That's why you are protected. The Freedom Union here in Australia is founded under using all of the international law that's available to us. We are relying upon the International Criminal Court. We are notifying the International Criminal Court of all of these war crimes being committed by all of these criminals here in Australia. The international laws that we are using are the same available in Britain, in Europe, in America, and I appeal to the world. Watch what the Freedom Union of Australia is doing. Everything that we are using is available to you in your country. It's available under a different set of circumstances because you're dealing with your own set of circumstances. But the international laws are all the same. And we are the first trade union in the world that are using them, weaponizing and exercising them, right? So Watch what we do. We're not claiming to be the world's best at anything, but we are trying to show you what we are doing. We are getting all the main things correct. We're trying to get the minor things more right than wrong. We're in new territory here. We're exploring on some cases. But watch what we are doing. Don't be fooled, ladies and gentlemen. It's not the size of the dog in the fight. It's the size of the fight in the dog. You watch this Freedom Union here in Australia, and you watch what we are going to do, and we will help anyone around the world do the same. We'll pass on all of our learnings, all of our knowledge, all of our templates. We will help anyone around the world, right? All we ask is to support us, watch what we are doing, and then allow us to influence your direction. So that's what we're coming from. We come to this war with clean hands. We've got no crimes against us. We're not in any court cases. We're not part of any political parties. We are here for our members only. Okay?
Well, yes, and on that note, freedomunion.org is the website if you're interested, and join the Freedom Union. Now, in terms of the Freedom Union, you've got a lot of sympathy. Of course, George Galloway and the British Workers' Party. I can see in the comments section, people are very excited. And you've got a lot of support there. But look, where does Australia stand in all of this? I have observed, John, in particularly the last few weeks, the public sentiment and public opinion is absolutely, completely against Zelensky now. If you remember at the start of the special military operation, when the conflict began, there was a bit of sympathy. A lot of people with Ukrainian flags in their profiles on social media, on Twitter, on Facebook, and people carrying on supporting Ukraine. It was the current thing. It was the trending thing. Yes, and by the way, as Paul Moore says, join the Workers' Party of Britain. Also, if you're in Britain, but there was a period where the Ukrainians had a bit of success. They had the sympathy, the current thing. But now you can see now what's happening. Public opinion is completely against Zelensky, completely against funding. We've got 10 days till Trump gets in. By the time most of you watch this broadcast, it'll be 7 days, 6 days, 5 days, 4 days, 3 days, 2 days. Trump is getting in. He's promised 24 hours he will have it settled. 24 hours is what he said. And Zelensky, he needs to go. Zelensky, he has caused, he will end up like that Romanian leader. What was his name? What was his bloke's name?
Ceausescu, or
that's him. That's what will happen to Zelensky. He'll be lynched by his own people. I mean, look what he's been doing: arresting people on the streets, arresting fathers, sons, brothers, arresting them, throwing them into vans, taking them off to the front, and they're killed a few days later. Ceausescu, as Baby Gerald points out. And that's what will happen to Zelensky. They're just waiting for the moment to grab Zelensky. He's protected literally by US Special Forces, German and British Secret Service and Special Forces. In a way, some may say he's being protected, but by the same token, he probably is actually captured by them. And they're the ones, he's just a mouthpiece, right?
Yeah.
There was an opportunity early on in the special military operation for everything to just finish and stop, right? Russia just wanted to push the enemies away from its regions and secure those lands, right? Russia has poured in colossal amounts of money, trillions and trillions of rubles, rebuilding these new areas. Crimea, Donetsk People's Republics, Lugansk People's Republics, Kherson, Zaporozhye regions. Russia is investing into those regions. That's all Russia wanted to do, is just protect its own people. Because let's face it, right? The Soviet Union should never have collapsed in the way it did. These little countries, these Chihuahuas, these Baltic countries, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, should never have been able to be in a position where they've taken independence by the goodwill of Moscow. Russia has said, okay, fair enough, have your little countries back. And what do? They join NATO. And what do? Then they supply weapons and they fund Nazis to attack Russia. Right? Disgusting. It's wrong. And guess what? In the end, Russia will win. And Russia is winning. And that's the bottom line. And look, for all those people watching, and John, including you, including for yourself, and all of your colleagues in the Freedom Union in Australia and other groups that are affiliated with you, thank you for being on the right side of history, because once Russia wins, once the dust settles, we'll be able to look over our shoulder, have a look around and see who's still with us and who's on the right team, who's on the right side of history. And then it's a bright future. Then it's an interesting future. Sanctions are lifted. Take Australia, for example, right? Let's just give a good example. Take Australia, for example. Australia and Russia used to trade billions and billions of dollars import-export between themselves, but most of it was actually 90% of it was Australia exporting to Russia. Australia making money, Australian farmers selling beef, Australian miners selling uranium, aluminium, and other goods, Australian wine. Now, this will all come back, right? I just wonder who's going to have their fingers in the pie, right? Who's going to be involved in the resurgence and the recommencement of trade after the sanctions are lifted. So we need to make sure.
Simeon, look, Russia, you've hit the nail on the head. Russia has been investing in its own future. And what we've been doing, our side, we have been money laundering. Our people have been money laundering, right? All the money that's going into Ukraine, they're all money laundering. It's all money going through Zelensky and all of his criminal enterprises over there. They keep a slice of the action. Remember, Joseph Biden, his son, 10% for the big guy, Joe Biden. So he's getting all the kickback. The same about Australia with our belligerent occupation. All the money that goes overseas is all washed, and a bit comes back to the Labor Party, the Liberal Party, and all the rest of it. Wait until you find out what's gone on with the Clinton Foundation. If you think Ukraine is dirty, wait until the information with the Clinton Foundation comes out. The Freedom Union is committed to exposing the lot of all of this. The lot of it. We stand with the people of Russia, we stand with President Putin, and we stand with the innocents of Ukraine, not those Nazi bastards over there that need to be conquered, held to account, and bloody put through the criminal system and dealt with.
Well, really, they need a Nuremberg too, to look into all of those war crimes that have been committed. And it's a genocide. It's the
Amen.
Look,
Amen.
The people, you're right, who are suffering most are the Ukrainian people, because they've got a government who hates them. Zelensky hates his own people. Zelensky has no sympathy. I would say that Russia has far more sympathy to the average Ukrainian than Zelensky does. And we can prove it very easily, because Russia has actually avoided doing strong, concise, and mass missile strikes, right? They've avoided that because they don't want... They don't want the casualties. No. It brings no pleasure to Russia or Russians to see Ukrainians die. No pleasure whatsoever. Same religion, same church, same people. And President Putin has said repeatedly, we still, after everything that's happened, we still consider them one people, a brotherly people. Right? Ukraine and Russia were always the same country. Always. And I can see in the comment section, Simo Georgievich, long-time viewer of the Aussie Cossack channel before, when it used to be on YouTube. Welcome, Simo. He says, Russia is too nice and polite. It's ridiculous. Russia is polite. And I've said this before, I'll say it again. Russian soldiers are dying, spilling their blood, right, for the sake of Ukrainian civilians. Because if Putin acted like George Bush or Tony Blair, he wouldn't send infantry in. He wouldn't send in tanks.
No.
He would sit back. He would obliterate everything, carpet bomb everything, use all the missiles, destroy everything, and then he will mop up, right? But the Russians have been going house to house, building to building, cellar to cellar, block to block, village to town to city, right? Field to field. It's hard war. It's a hard way to fight. It's an old-fashioned way to fight. This is probably the last war we'll see where there's true conventional warfare, John. I mean, the future wars after this are going to be all drones. All drones.
No. It's look again, mate. It's heartbreaking to see the price that's being paid by the Russian people. If there's one country in this world that has sacrificed, it's the Russians. And I've loved the Russians all my life.
Bring that comment back from Tommy. Tommy is spot on with that. Zelensky feeds Christian landowners into the meat grinder for BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street.
Yes.
Prove me wrong.
Yeah.
That is what is going on. And BlackRock has basically taken over Ukraine. That's who Russia is really fighting. Russia is not really fighting the Ukrainian people at all. The Ukrainian people are victims themselves who have been caught up in this, and they're being held hostage. They're being forced into this. You know, Russia has no forced mobilization. Russia just offers very, very good conditions for its soldiers and very good motivation. For example, in terms of Russian wages, if a Russian soldier happened to be injured or killed in battle, huge amount of money is paid to his family as a way of helping and supporting his widow and his family, his children leaves behind. So Russia is motivating its soldiers, but most importantly, the ideological motivation, right? All the Russian soldiers basically are volunteers.
Here in Australia, Simeon, our ex-diggers who have sacrificed get thrown to the dogs. Thrown to the dogs. It's a disgrace. I've got personal friends of mine, ex-Australian diggers, who've spent decades serving their country that have now been thrown to the dogs. It's a disgrace. It's a heartbreaking disgrace how we treat our troops. The same in America, the homeless of their veterans. It's a heartbreaking disgrace. The same in Britain. Have a look at all the Tommy Robinson reports. I'm not promoting Tommy and all that stuff. I'm simply stating it. Have a look at what's happening to our servicemen and then go to Russia and tell me that the Russians don't get it. They get it all right, mate. President Putin and the Russian people are right behind their troops, which is why their young men join.
And the other thing is the Russian country, the Russian people, they have a culture of respecting veterans and remembering war and remembering victory and preserving the memory of victory. And that's actually one of the reasons.
We used to. We used to.
We used to have great Anzac Day parades. We used to have military parades in Australia. Where do you see that now?
Listen, Simeon, my wife is Japanese, but both my children, half Japanese and half Australian, they both went to the grammar school, private schools, okay? Every Anzac Day, both my children, mate, join the school band. They go down and play the Australian anthem and march with all our diggers, mate. They're so proud. They are so proud to play music for our Australian diggers marching down with their school band. They loved our diggers and were so proud of them. Now, everything about this country we are taught to hate. Everything about this country we're taught to be ashamed. I mean, this is just outrageous. We have one of the best countries on this planet, Simeon, and we've trashed it. We've allowed these central bankers, these Khazarian central bankers, and Ukraine is the head of the snake. Ukraine is, Rick Bosey was correct, absolutely correct when he said Ukraine was the head of the snake and Putin is cutting the head off it. And God bless President Putin for doing it, and God bless the Russian people.
Thank you. And it's great that there's that level of support in the West. And the Western governments and Western leaders, they know that there is very strong sentiment. In Australia, for example, people can see right through the virtue signaling of the Australian government when it comes to Ukraine. Let's just face it, the Australian government themselves know that this is wrong. It's a bad idea to be supplying weapons to be killing Russians, right? It's a bad idea, wrong side of history. And look, I hope that President Trump in a few days' time when he assumes office, I hope he makes that clear to everyone. I hope he says, we've done the wrong thing. Biden was wrong. Clinton was wrong. Kamala was wrong. Albright was wrong. Newland was wrong. I hope he says that. And I hope he says enough is enough. Not a cent more to Zelensky. Not a single weapon more. You see now, in the dying days of the Biden regime, they're flooding Zelensky with billions of dollars. Going all in as much as they can push, as much as they can give money to Zelensky before Trump gets in. Man, this should be illegal. Right? This is certainly not the will of the American people. Look what's happening in Los Angeles today. The city's on fire. Everything's burning. Half the city's burnt down. Do you think Zelensky's going to send a fire truck? Do you think Zelensky's going to send $2 to help the people of Los Angeles? No. In fact, it was actually the opposite. One of the reasons that the firefighters in the United States, they don't have enough gear because they sent all of their gear to Ukraine. Brilliant. So what we need is the the world to change, the world to improve. We need to get on with being friends again, get on with trade, get on with helping, increasing healthy birth rates, having healthy children, looking at supporting families in all countries, in the United States, in the UK, in Europe, right? We've got to put a stop to this outrageous, out of control immigration. I don't think there's anyone who disagrees with that. And that goes for all of these countries. In Britain, it's out of control. In France, in Australia, it's also out of control. I mean, look what happened in Australia. Albanese has invited, what is it, like 1 million migrants for our country in Australia, only 27 million. It's a lot of people.
I'm surrounded. Look, Simeon, I live, my office is right in the Brisbane city. I live only a couple of kilometres down the river. I live on my boat. All around me, up and down the river, there are homeless people, hundreds of them.
But they're not homeless migrants, they're homeless locals.
No, Aussies. Yes. And it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. I've got to go past it regularly, and it breaks my heart. Now, our country and Queensland, the greatest state in Australia, I'm telling you, this is the greatest place to live in the world here in Queensland. It's been trashed. They're turning it into a shithole, right? They're importing the dregs of the world to live here, while all of the locals are being thrown into the scrap heap. They're being taxed into homelessness. They can't afford car registration, petrol prices, the rents up here are unbelievable. $1,000 a week to rent a house. I mean, I can't believe it. Electricity, fuel, travel, public transport, everything. They're being taxed into homelessness up here. And it's not an accident. It's deliberate, Simeon. We got to get rid of these central bankers, mate. They got to go. They got to go. And the two men of the world, mate, is President Putin and President Trump. If they say it goes, it goes. And we need these two men. We need them both. We'll jail you for years, Simeon. They wanted to jail me for 2 years on bodgy charges for a Facebook post. A Facebook post. I ended up getting out of that by the skin of my teeth. But I'm saying to you, Simeon, there's two sets of laws. One for them, which is complete protection, and another set for us, which is you go to jail on a whim. There's two sets of criminal laws here, mate. Nothing for them, everything against us, right? And that's how they're playing the game, you know. It's outrageous. There's no law and order in this country. There's not. There's guns, there's dogs, there's frequency weapons, there's bashings, there's all that, but there is no law and order. None. I say join a union. Join the Freedom Union. We can offer international law, international protections. The only reason why they can't lay a finger on you, Simeon, is because of international law and international protections. Look at it. There's arrest warrants out on Benjamin Netanyahu and others. I say let's load this international criminal court up from all around the world. Let's gather the evidence and then demand that the ICC do its job and demand that President Putin and President Trump force the ICC to do its job. We can do this, Simeon. We can do it. But you can't do it as an individual. Join the Australian Freedom Union if you're in the country. If you're in Great Britain, join the British Union over there, okay? George Galloway, mate, is one of the world's greatest contributors. George is a great asset to the working class of the world, and we need to get in behind his channel, his platform. He's given us a voice. Well, let's use it. Let's use it. Let's get active. If George has built it for us, let's go and use it. We need him. We need his platform, and we need all of yous, right? And let's collaborate. Anything the Australian Freedom Union can offer the world, offer anyone in Australia and the world, the same laws that we are using are open to you all over the world and all over Australia. If we can help you, we will. I've got the best team of activists in this country, the best team. I bring 40 years experience. I'm the former Trades Hall president for 3 years, the former 7 years state secretary of the CFMEU. I bring enormous experience into this proposition, Simeon, and a great team to execute. All we need is exposure and the support. And we will, mate, you watch. Don't worry about the size of the dog in this fight, Simeon. You look at the size of the fight that's in the Freedom Union. We're ready for it. We're ready.
Well, we've got strong allies in United Kingdom in the form of George Galloway and the British Workers' Party. And it's a great thing that there is this cross-continental collaboration, should we call it. We are all part of the Commonwealth, of course. And our opponents, our enemies, our political opponents should be worried. And they are worried because people, the little guys are becoming the big guys. And the big guys are losing their credibility, losing their authoritarianism, and they're losing their influence. Right? The media's influence is fading. The government's influence is fading, and everybody knows it. It can no longer be hidden.
They've lost the war. They've lost the war. They are now in the cover-up. Right? They've got to go through the mass cover-up, which is why the censorship. They don't censor anyone, right? If they don't care. They only censor if they're worried, right? They're worried because they're in the cover-up. They've committed the crime. We've got the evidence that they've committed the crime. The whole world has watched them commit this crime. Now they're in the cover-up, right? Okay, the cover-up is they're trying to, shut people up. They're trying to censorship. They're trying to confuse, disorientate, and all the rest of it. Now, the Freedom Union, what we are doing is we're not allowing that to occur. We are capturing all of the evidence from our members of the war crimes. We are lodging it on their behalf. We got receipts for it. We're keeping records of all this because we know that very soon there's going to be another Nuremberg too, or some other military trial or something of some nature. There's going to come. It's going to come. And we intend to hold every one of these war criminal bastards to account. We want to see them hang, mate. We want to see him hang. And the head of the snake is Ukraine. Rick Bosey was right. I don't care if you don't like him. I don't care. Any of that means nothing to me. He was right. Ukraine is the head of the snake, and President Putin is cutting the head off, and God bless him. He needs President Trump in there to help him and shut all of this down. We need to get rid of these central banking Khazarians off the face of this earth, mate. And all of these Nazi bastards, they all got to go. And then all the world can prosper. All of us can live in peace. There's no reason why we've got to be, killing 60 and 70 million. I mean, these people are monsters trying to drag us into a third world war. They're monsters. They've already dragged us into 2 world wars, Vietnam, Korea, and everything else. None of these wars were necessary. They were all engineered by these bastards, mainly made up of Zionists, Freemasons, Khazarians, and bloody all the rest of these bloody Fabians and other secret societies. They are bloody parasites on humanity, and they need to be mopped up and dealt with.
Well, John, you've got plenty of support and new fans in the comment section. DG says impressive. Joseph says John Wilson #1, and people are very impressed. Of course,
I'm an ex-communist. I'm an ex-communist, Simeon. Listen, I am now. I've disavowed all of it. Right? I was fooled. We were all young and stupid once, and I was as well. But I was a very capable communist when I was involved. Very capable. I've given it all away. I'm now a man of God. I'm a Christian. That's it. Full stop. That's my political piece. I'm a member of no political party and will never join any political party. I'm a union man. I know how to run unions. Support the Freedom Union of Australia. Support us. If you support Palestine, if you're anti-Netanyahu, any of that stuff, join the Freedom Union of Australia. It's $200. Help us try to hold these bastards to account. We can't do it just with a handful of us. But if you get in behind us, you watch what we're going to do. You watch us, Simeon. We mean business, mate.
I fully agree with you. And Baby Gerald in the comments section says, well said, John Wilson. We need leaders like you here in the United States. And of course, the Freedom Union under John Wilson is very keen in collaborating with international groups, with people all around the world. with diplomacy. And I myself have joined the Freedom Union. So go to freedomunion.org to join. It's a good way of sticking it to the establishment. Just imagine you're sitting in the position of the government and you're watching this union grow. And it's not one of these fake unions which are an extension of the Labor Party, like the CFMEU. No. This is completely independent, isn't it, John? Completely independent. And if I can say that your mission is to throw a spanner in the works. Your mission is to make it hard for those people in power and to question them and hold them to account.
Simeon, this is the choice I will provide to the people of Australia. Listen, if they want a well-managed protest, a well-managed defence, a well-managed and organised union, I can give them that. Or if they want this to be the biggest fuck you ever sent to the Australian occupation, then I'll deliver that on their behalf, right? Their choice. If you want me to really turn it on and really take it up to these knucklehead clowns, the current Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, used to work for me. He was a 17-year-old university idiot. He was a useless idiot then, and he's a bigger useless idiot now. You get me? So I'm saying to you, all Australians, if you want me to deliver a nice little polite union, I'll give you that. That's like falling off a log. But if you want to turn this in the biggest fuck you ever sent to a bloody government, you talk to me. I'm sorry. Sorry, mate. I'm being told by my...
You've been censored.
I've got an office full of lawyers, mate.
Very good value. Well, look, we've got thousands of people tuned in now. Thousands are watching. Very funny. Hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button. Subscribe to George Galloway on Twitter, on YouTube. No to NATO, Twitter, YouTube. Aussie Cossack on Telegram. Have a look at all the links in the description below. And help us beat censorship by hitting the like button. I want to thank everyone who's tuned in. It's been a very interesting show. 2025, here we are. If I was the establishment, I would be worried because there's a lot of energy out there and a lot of enthusiasm. The energy is brewing and the world is on the cusp of change. The world, countries around the world, people have had enough. Either this becomes a very good peace or a very good war. It could go either way. War could continue. 2024 will look like kindergarten if things don't get better. If Putin and Trump don't make a deal, people are going to say in the comment section, and I do agree with them, how can you trust Trump? Very fond of Netanyahu and others. Well, that's the way the world works. And at the end of the day, I'm biased, I'll be honest with you. I really don't care as long as the situation with Russia is sorted, right? That's my first priority, first and foremost. Even though I was born in Australia, even though I'm an Australian citizen by birth, and so forth. But I just hope that in 10 days' time, Trump gets in and he delivers what he promised, right? He delivers what he promised. And let's just go back to being friends again. Let's go back to doing things that are good for humanity. Instead of spending hundreds of billions of dollars on weapons, let's feed the homeless. Let's feed the hungry. Let's bring down interest rates. Let's give our children a good education. Let's look at healthcare, real healthcare, not this big pharma false healthcare, but pretending to have more flu outbreaks and so forth. Actually, Moderna's share price went up 23% yesterday. If you don't believe me, go and check on Google. Novavax share price went up 17%. You know why? Because they want another scare campaign. It's flu season. But we thank John for joining us. We thank all of our viewers in the comment section. And let me know as well if you're an old Aussie Cossack viewer or listener, because I'm very keen to see and read your comments all the time. I thank you all for tuning in tonight. And we have to thank the team at No to NATO, the British Workers' Party, and George Galloway for this platform. And on the 20th of January, outside the US Embassy in Battersea, London, at 12 p.m. midday, bring your flags, bring your signs, bring your mates, bring your megaphones, make some noise, and say no to NATO and celebrate the fact that it's the end of the Biden regime. George Galloway will be speaking there in person. The event will be broadcast live also on these platforms, so tune in for that. And that's in 10 days' time on the 20th of January. And after that, after George Galloway's event on the 20th of January, we'll do something in Australia to follow it up also and keep the pressure on, because that's what we can do. We've got people here in London on the streets, in Birmingham on the streets, in Liverpool on the streets, Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth, Adelaide, in Australia, people in the United States. Let me know where you're watching from. There we go. Henry Collins, Does Doug, Nobby Pies, Baby Gerald, Joseph Croatia. Great to see you. And thank you very much for tuning in. I wish you a good morning in Australia if you're watching here, and a good evening if you're watching in the US and the UK. It's been a pleasure. I'm your host, Aussie Cossack. You've been watching No to NATO.
Piss heads out.